Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at Pakistan's stance on climate change and, of course, the upcoming COP28 in Dubai. And this is going to be, of course, a very important conference in which the caretaker Prime Minister is taking part in presenting Pakistan's case. We've already fought a lot with climate change resilience and, of course, with regards to climate change justice, pleading Pakistan's case successfully and moving forward with a loss and damage fund. However, its implementation is still yet to be seen. There is, of course, a lot of areas that need to be focused on, especially with regards to countries like Pakistan and what the developed countries have committed in terms of the financial assistance that needs to be provided as part of climate change justice to countries like Pakistan. And so we need to proceed forward in making sure that this agenda is actually heard and that we are moving towards a phase where implementation of these mechanisms is being carried out. At the same time, of course, Pakistan is at a point where it's focusing itself on a lot of climate change issues and is taking a look at a number of areas and measures that can be taken at the national front as well. However, these measures will be limited in their scope and value and what they're able to change if it is not backed by global measures that are also required, especially with regards to financial institutions and redistribution of financial aid for climate change. There is, of course, the National Adaptation Plan that Pakistan is moving forward with that talks about climate change resilience and developing climate-friendly solutions in all facets of the country. But this, of course, is something that also needs a lot of support from not only within Pakistan and the private sector, but also with regards to the kind of bilateral and multilateral engagements that we have, including world bodies such as the World Bank and IMF that need to provide their own economic support to the country. Speaking of which, we also know that the IMF is pushing for its own policies and areas that Pakistan will need to work on and improve, especially with regards to climate change in terms of developing investment policies, particularly with regards to climate resilience and making this more transparent with regards to what action has been taken or the impact that this has seen, especially in the current fiscal year. And then moving forward in terms of making sure that this reflects in the upcoming budget as well, where the climate change and the financial ministries are sitting together and devising a way forward that is not only transparent, it is also motivated towards making sure that the kind of work that is required on ground is something that can possibly be done. However, still we know that the numbers are huge. The World Bank estimates that about $348 billion will be needed by 2030 to maintain only resilience in Pakistan. And so this, of course, is going to be a big challenge given the kind of economic challenges we already face. So we're going to be taking a look at what this means for us in Pakistan. And then, of course, also what kind of stance will be presented in the COP28, what we hope to achieve, and how we're going to proceed forward with the kind of aspects that the IMF is also asking the country to move towards. For this and more, of course, I've been joined in the studios by senior analysts Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. We've also been joined online by Dr. Imran Saqib, Khalid, who's the Director of Governance and Policy, WWF Pakistan, and by Mr. Ali Tauqeer, sheikh, who's a climate change expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Before we continue and talk about the various aspects that need to be addressed, let's take a look at a report prepared by our desk.
World leaders, government representatives and delegates are set together for the annual United Nations Climate Change Summit known as the Conference of the Parties or COP28 in Dubai, UAE. The event is set to be held for 13 days starting from November 30th to December 12th. COP is the primary decision-making body of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, established in 1992. The primary objective of COP each year is to review and calibrate the implementation of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change terms, Paris Agreement, and Kyoto Protocol, a binding treaty agreed in 1997 for industrialized nations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Reining in fossil fuels and carbon emissions are expected to be topping the agenda of the mood. International funding to help countries adapt to climate change will also be the hotly debated, as developing countries have been demanding more contributions from the industrialized nations. An ambitious loss and damages fund agreed last year to support poorer nations to help manage the negative effects of the climate change has yet to be put into place. World leaders had agreed to the fund after COP27 last year, but they have failed to reach consensus on the most important questions of all: which states will pay into it and how much. Countries will also face the first review of their progress towards the Paris Agreement, a landmark international treaty on limiting carbon emissions that was signed at the COP21 almost 8 years ago. Representatives of 197 countries who have signed or are parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change will participate primarily through debates and negotiations. The event is considered an opportunity for countries to better rein in climate change by devising improved targets and measures through tools such as finance, technology, and capacity building. The conference comes weeks after a United Nations report said greenhouse gases in the atmosphere hit a record high in 2022. Based on countries' current climate plans, the report says global carbon emissions by 2030 will be cut by only 2% compared with 2019 levels, far short of the 43% fall needed to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial levels. The summit will be divided into a blue zone with sessions for unaccredited participants such as state representatives only, and a green zone with events and exhibits for registered participants from the public and civil society. Caretaker Prime Minister Anwarul Haqqaqar will represent Pakistan during the high-level segment of COP28. Climate change is an issue of national endurance for the countries like Pakistan. Pakistan was playing a positive role in the global climate debate through climate diplomacy. Despite its less than 1% imprint on the global climate change factors, Pakistan is amongst the countries hugely affected by the changes. One-third of the country's population is badly affected by the climate-induced floods.
Well, you heard the report, and we're going to be taking a look at what this means in terms of our actions ahead, especially with regards to COP28. And Mr. Ali Tauqeer, I'll start with you. Given, of course, the understanding that you have regarding climate change and what Pakistan is going through, I want to understand whether or not you think our teams from the top leadership to, of course, our climate ministry and others who are putting forward this agenda of climate change resilience and climate change justice are fully prepared in terms of the kind of data that is there or the information available, especially post the floods in 2022, to bring forth this discussion at COP28 and making the world understand what it is that we are at a risk of, and how is it that we need to proceed forward with the kind of urgency that is required, especially in terms of financial mechanisms that need to be put in place. What sort of agenda items do you think need to be part of this discussion, and whether or not we have a plan moving forward?
Well, thank you, ma'am. It's wonderful to be back in the program after a few days. I think you have raised a very important question. The Prime Minister and his entourage is there to make full use of the opportunity to showcase Pakistan's vulnerability and the losses that it has incurred. Historically, and particularly last year's losses were in excess of 30 billion US dollars, and that's a very large amount for a country that is otherwise stripped with financial resources, does not have a huge productivity, where the economic growth is very low, where the human development index is very poor, and infrastructure for development is also very weak. So for a country that has as many problems as Pakistan has, any damage from climate change on our economy, on our people and their lives and livelihoods has immense value. So we have gone with expectations, high expectations that Pakistan has a role to play. So already as far as media is concerned, it has been reported that Pakistan will argue for replenishing the Green Climate Fund, that is $100 billion annually, operationalizing loss and damage fund. But on balance, there are 5 issues that will gain attention from everyone, including Pakistan. First one is about the fossil fuel plans to phase them out. It's a moot point because the host is a very large oil producing and oil exporting country. They are not in great rush to phase out fossil fuel. The income generated for the host country is large, whereas the global consensus after the Paris Agreement was to quickly phase out fossil fuels starting with coal. So that will be an important point. There'll be many tales and stories from front lines. You mentioned Pakistan's story from 1921, 22. There have been other stories from Iraq, from Libya, from other countries where disasters have been huge. Um, and there will be many other victims who will try to occupy the same vulnerability position that Pakistan had occupied in 2021, in 2022, the last COP. We were the poster boys, but now there are other competitors in that domain. Uh, there'll be a moot point about the startup cash required for loss and damage. How much? The expectation from the developing countries was 100 billion. The present estimates are that this may well be from $0 to $1 billion as a starting fund. So it will be a very modest fund, and it'll give priority to least developed countries and to island countries, not to low-income countries. For low-income countries like Pakistan, there'll be um, there'll be a special fund, a special window to provide humanitarian assistance promptly with great speed immediately after the losses. But it will not be support for reconstruction, rehabilitation. It will be humanitarian assistance. Another element will be pledges to the GCF. The pledges were made very generously, but they have not been honored, and now the GCF is feeling the heat. It does not have as many resources, as many applications. And finally, I want to mention is the coal and clean energy will be a major issue. There are international beneficiaries from phasing out coal, such as South Africa, that had about $10 billion deal, Vietnam, Indonesia, they had large deals, they negotiated, and they were negotiating to phase out of coal, whereas Pakistan as a country has recently, last 5-8 years, started on coal. So these are some of the issues that will occupy the attention of global community during the 13 days. So it will not be a hugely important COP as far as decisions are concerned. It will be just a functioning bare minimum consensus that will probably emerge. The expectations are very modest from all quarters. And last point that I want to make is, I think it's my suspicion that the COP will be um, COP will be people will be distracted at the COP with Gaza. Atrocities in Gaza will emit heat that will influence and impact the agenda and deliberations at COP. And I think tomorrow when VIPs start making speeches at the opening ceremony, we'll see that one after the other will come to this. And that is where the gulf between the developed European countries and the United States and Israel on the one hand, and developing countries like Pakistan, Muslim or non-Muslim countries will be on the other side. So Gaza will adversely affect the climate change progress at the COP in the coming week. Thank you.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Imran, the situation, especially in terms of the kind of plan that Pakistan has internally, is also important to back up whatever it's asking for from global leaders. And I understand there's a national adaptation plan, but there is lots more in terms of climate resilience and the kind of climate-friendly policies that we need to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. Insofar as we've seen since a more vigorous sort of conversation has started, particularly after 2022, what aspects have we really worked on or successfully can put forward to portray our seriousness to the issue and our own efforts in this? And what do you think is still missing in terms of governance at home?
Yes, thank you so much for having me be a part of this program. It's always an honor to share the same stage as my mentor, Ali Tauqeer Sheikh. Coming to the National Adaptation Plan, it's a wonderful climate change policy since 2013 now. It was revised in 2021. And these are some good policies, but when it comes to their implementation, we're still struggling. After the 18th Amendment, environment and climate change are provincial issues. So what we'd really like to see is that the National Adaptation Plan is set up in a way whereby the local governments can pick up on it and develop their own local level adaptation plans. So not even at the provincial level, but at the local level, at the district level, at the tehsil level. And this is something that we need to look towards. This may happen over the next 5 to 10 years, but this is going to be very important in terms of addressing the various risks that emanate from the climate crisis. So, up in the northern areas, we're facing glacial lake outburst floods. In the south, the situation is quite different with droughts and sea level rise, and there are people migrating. The issue might be water management is going to be key across the board. Coordination between Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Climate Change, Ministry of Water Resources, Ministry of Finance will be important. And then you need to have coordination amongst and between the line departments in the provinces and beyond. So the civil society will have to play a role. So all of those things need to come together. And I think we're starting to do that. We're still not there yet. But what the floods from last year and other related events have shown that there are some positives to pick up on. When it comes to responding to the COVID crisis, for example, or the floods last year, there wasn't much outside aid coming in. It was Pakistanis themselves putting other Pakistanis first and trying to address the situation. Now, how long can we continue to do that without foreign help? That is a question. And in order to address this need, because Sheikh Saab was right, financing hasn't been made available internationally. So when it's not there, you respond on your own. So people who were affected by floods in Nasirabad, for example, last year in Balochistan, they are already responding. They're already adapting to the situation. We need to support them. And our governance mechanisms really need to be brought in line in terms of addressing the risks that these communities are facing. So that would mean ensuring that the data is being shared, ensuring that people are cooperating. There are district level governments in place who are responsible for taking the local level adaptation plans and addressing them. So all of those things are important. And then we need to take some success stories and take them to avenues such as the Conference of Parties in Dubai and beyond, and highlight them and say, look, this is what we are doing. This is something that other countries can learn from. And this is why it's important for more financial and technical help for countries like Pakistan, because we'd like to replicate these success stories across the country. We're a country of 240 million people, and we can do a lot. But at the end of the day, due to the magnitude of the climate crisis, we will need international help. And I'd just like to add to what Sheikh Saab said. There's $100 billion was promised about 10 years back. It has never materialized. And now the estimates are that the amount of financing needed for adaptation needs globally will be around 500 billion to $1 trillion US. Where is that money going to come from? That's going to be a key ask. And the struggle is that the developed countries are going to say, no, we don't have the funds, and they're already doing that. Even the loss and damage facility, although it has come about, we are not sure who's going to be able to finance that. So
right, absolutely. And these are important questions, Dr. Imran, that must be asked, and we hope that these issues are actually raised in the upcoming conference as well. And Faisal, I wanted to take your perspective as well, as in terms of course, the very essential area that we're working on, and this gathering brings a platform where Pakistan can really put forward its stance and then fight for not just its own self, but also countries such as Pakistan that need help from developed countries. But given the kind of circumstance, the kind of numbers that we hear Dr. Imran and Mr. Ali also talk about, and the way that this needs urgent action, what possibly can be put forward, or what can we actually achieve, particularly from COP28, to make sure that we don't just now talk about rhetoric or discussions or commitments, but actually see something happening?
Yes, Sana, when we talk about what we require from COP28, of course, Pakistan is there to present its case, not for the aid, not for anybody's help. We want to present a case in which we demand climate justice from the world. Why? Because Pakistan is a country that is having one of the lowest carbon emissions, and the disaster which world is facing, we are a country that has the least to do with it, when it comes to turning it into a disaster. But when it comes to effects of it, of course, Pakistan is a country that is one of the worst hit by climate change and global warming. I mean, I'm somebody who's visited last year, who's visited Sindh province as well as Balochistan province as well. I was listening to Dr. Imran when he was talking about the people on ground, especially when we talk about the farmers, the lower level farmers of Sindh. They were the worst hit, and of course they needed help at that time. Families after families, they needed help, and of course it was a sort of economic burden on the government, because it was an SOS call from the people direct to the state. And at the same time, when I visited the flash flooded areas of Balochistan, I mean, it was astonishing for me to see that families out there, they rely upon the livestock, and they were, I mean, everyone I met, they were just talking about their livestock, because that livestock was their lifeline. And that lifeline, of course, had vanished in the flash flooding. And after that, what happened? Of course, it is something, the responsibility of the government to resettle them, to provide them with, with a sort of a work, and with sort of livestock as well, so that they can continue their life, their economy. A local economy is much needed for that. At that time, when Pakistan was facing all of these problems, I mean, Pakistan at the same time was facing, of course, questioning by IMF as well. We were expecting that IMF would be very lenient to Pakistan, owing to the fact that Pakistan has been, facing this havoc, which is actually created by the world, not just because of Pakistan that Pakistan is here, And if we talk about what kind of, Pakistan's requirements are, well, if we talk about R&D, research and development, tech transfer, and if we talk about energy crisis of Pakistan, of course the world has excelled in this research and development, and they need to share the tech, not only with the Pakistan, but any country that economically challenges, it is facing economic challenges. I mean, all of them countries, they need help from the developed world, and that help can be extended to Pakistan by giving Pakistan the special rates, or countries like Pakistan, they must be asking for special rates when it comes to tech transfer to Pakistan. But and of course, when we face the problems related to energy crisis, I mean, we can overcome it. And we can only overcome it through the green, energy.
Absolutely, but Faisal, I want to understand, while I understand the kind of suggestions that you're talking about and how fruitful they may be, but at the same time, we're not even able to realize commitments that have already been made. How do we actually proceed towards that? Do you think that this needs to be done in parallel to commitments already done? Shouldn't we perhaps pursue those first?
Yeah, you're very right about it, Sana. Remember, we have done so many programs related to it that world has been obviously pledging that they will be coming out to help Pakistan, but that help, I don't know where it is right now. But of course, it needs to be talked about, it needs to be highlighted, Pakistan at the same time. And Pakistan, obviously, and I'm pretty much sure that Pakistan will be highlighting these issues as well. The pledges which were made to Pakistan, they need to be obviously delivered to Pakistan, and now Pakistan knows that there are problems which are being faced by the world in terms of Ukraine crisis, or in terms of Gaza crisis. But at the same time, Pakistan has went through a crisis of its own.
Right.
And that crisis was directly related to the climate change, and them pledges must be delivered to Pakistan, number one, and number two, the new new propositions which must be presented by Pakistan are related to the tech transfer to Pakistan, and of course the special rates when it comes to research and development,
right,
related to climate change, how to cope with it. And even if we talk about the dams, them dams need to be funded by the world as well.
All right, Farrukh, I want to then understand when we talk about climate change justice, and when this was a discussion that first was put forth, it was celebrated as a victory that this is something everybody is agreeing on, or at least as part of the discourse. But now we're almost 2 years ahead, and we still need to see a lot of that actually materialize into something tangible, and the commitments even way before that haven't been seen, as Dr. Imran was pointing out. And so I want to understand, how exactly does this mechanism actually work in terms of who's even going to make these countries accountable for their pledges? How is it that it's going to be ensured that there is redistribution of finances? What sort of pushing factor will there be for countries to actually deliver on their promises? I understand there are platforms like the COP28, but I don't know if there is somebody who can hold the countries accountable. Can Pakistan do that, or is like any other body available for that?
Right, Sana. Thank you very much for the question. I think that the simple answer to your question is no one can do it. Right? We keep on setting ourselves to fail when we say that there should be climate justice. I mean, come on, there's barely any justice in the international order. If you don't believe me, just call somebody in Gaza and ask them what is going on there, right? So I don't think that all the fat cats, powerful lobbies, powerful countries can be held accountable. Perhaps someday they might be, because someday climate is going to get their number as well, climate changes. But right now, things are the way they are. Of course, you can lobby, of course, you can argue. One thing that I take exception to, what Faisal was earlier saying, that IMF should have done this and it did not. I think that IMF has already been exceptionally generous when it came to COVID situation. If you remember the SDR solution, that is on their behalf, I think that they were doing the right thing. But were we managing that situation properly? The kind of money that came and went to the banks and what exactly became of it, that is the biggest question at that time. And nobody talks about it. Actually, when government of Pakistan tried to tax the banks that kept on milking that opportunity through a windfall, tax, we have seen that Islamabad High Court just an hour ago has struck down that SRO that was actually taxing them, right? The biggest problem is not with the world, Sana. The world is the way it is. It has been the way it was for quite some time. How do you actually find a way to work with the world is the biggest question. And I think that I'm really glad that Ali Tauqeer Sheikh Sahab is with us, who is a consummate professional. Even though you missed a little bit of sarcasm at the start when he pointed out that it is good to see you after quite some time. And that was a poignant reference to the fact that every time there is a climate emergency or climate summit, or then some kind of fundraising regarding climate, you ask him to actually appear on television, otherwise don't. But he has been actually focusing on these matters consistently. His columns are great. If you have seen it, he talks about in one of the columns. He actually pointed out about the fiscal problems that we face, right? The way you actually make budget and how do you actually include all these things. By the way, IMF has also asked you to actually include those matters in your budgetary outlay and how the way you function. The biggest problem, Sana, is that regardless of whether the world can provide you with any funds or not, you have to fix your responsibility. You have to actually correct your priorities. And we haven't been able to do it. How often have you heard about this country, taking care of the most vulnerable regarding climate change, right? For example, Faisal was just mentioning something very interesting. He mentioned, Balochistan's victims of flood, and then Sindh as well. Will it really shock you when I tell you that people who are dispossessed by those floods 2 years ago, many of them are still in the lurch? They still haven't gotten any kind of solution. They still haven't been able to come back to their own houses, right? So with that kind of a situation, I think that it is important to remember that you have to first focus on your own home and you have to fix your responsibility. I agree with Dr. Imran that the actual locus of change has to be the local government, where everything actually takes place. But the problem then again is we can keep on shifting blame and we can keep on saying that the world hasn't provided you with the funds. How many programs have we offered? How many ideas we have actually out of box solutions we have come up with? We haven't been able to. Even though COP27 was a breakout moment for two of our very important leaders. It was a breakout moment for Shehbaz Sharif, where he, from an administrator, he suddenly became a politician, a leader, right? Similarly, Sherry Rahman also, the way she conducted herself and lobbied there, that was important. But what is happening in the country? How many hours of your national debate is focused per day on climate change? Nothing is. How many people are actually, as journalists, are going out to report on the plight of the victims of climate change? Not many people are. Regarding COP28, also just to point out regarding justice or lack thereof, in COP27 there were 626 or something around that oil lobbyists present there. That was a bigger delegation than any country that sent there, right? And this time, as was pointed out earlier, it is happening in Dubai. That is a country that essentially actually is run through fuel money, right? Oil money. With that kind of a situation, and then President Biden actually dropping out, and then Pope Francis, we thought that he's going to be there because he was going to be a very important moment, his presence there, but he is not going there either. So I am concerned that right now we keep on talking about things that are not there, rather than focusing on things that we could have done already.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an important factor, especially given how far we've come and what needs are there. And Mr. Ali, when we take a look at the situation, and especially what Farrukh was talking about with regards to what IMF has asked for, especially in relation to climate friendly or climate resilient infrastructure, the kind of public investment policies that it's pushing towards, and how to also include these factors within the upcoming budget and even move forward with more transparency in terms of climate change spending. How exactly do you think that this can then be brought in, what we're seeing right now in the country with the elections coming up and with a change of government, with a lot of people saying that this is one of the priority areas of the country, but at the same time, we don't see this actually factoring in our budgets and factoring in the kind of plans that we have and the policy that is required. How do we proceed with that at home in terms of being more transparent in publishing climate change spending, gathering more data, bringing this in, incorporating it in our budget, and moving towards climate financing projects with other countries in terms of our bilateral engagements as well? How are we going to form this sort of correlation between these different areas?
As Farrukh has said, I fully agree with him. The steps that need to be taken are mostly internal. There cannot be in climate justice at the international level unless there is a climate justice in the country. These are two intrinsically linked. When we'll start working on climate justice in our domestic setting, we will begin to see the inflow of international finance as well, because then we'll have the capability, the credibility to attract international finance. Till that time, it will be all elusive. Now, the estimates are that Pakistan is losing about 5% of its GDP annually to climate change related damages. 5% of GDP is about 20 billion US dollars. And $25 billion we have to generate internally from the existing fiscal space. We are told that it's very tight. Yes, it may be very tight because there is elite capture. But if we realistically look at it, $20 billion is not a huge sum for the existential or national security challenge to the Pakistan. It's the serious most national security challenge. Just to give you an example, only $6.5 billion worth of untargeted subsidies are going in agriculture only. So if you have to generate $20 billion, you get about $5 or $6 or $7 billion from agriculture alone. Then the water sector has another set of about $10 billion worth of subsidies, untargeted subsidies. We provide free water to agriculture, A-class water, very clean, very good quality water to third-class agriculture, and that produces fabrics at low cost to subsidize European consumers in the European market. So it's about 10 billion. So I'm not saying that all the money should come to climate change only. There's education, there is health, there is nutrition, there is stunting, there is urban planning. There are many, many issues that we have. But when we say that we don't have the financing, I think we are oftentimes not being honest with ourselves. When we say that give $100 billion to Green Climate Fund, we are not saying how we will spend $1 billion domestically. I mean, even if there are $500 billion or $5,000 billion, we cannot be very happy with that fund unless we can have the ability to access that. And now we can have that ability to access them. That is not a rocket science. Only if we could revise PC1, PC2, PC3, PC4, PC5. And these are the documents that were designed during Maqbool Huq's time about 60 years ago. No country can make any progress if it cannot revise its planning documents for half a century. It's very, very commonsensical. One doesn't need to be a rocket scientist. I can get, or any Pakistani can get a loan to buy a car or a motorbike, but you cannot get loans, easy loans, to have solar or EVs, solar units at your rooftops, and especially if you're low income, middle. So the question is the disparities that are there in this country that discriminate against climate action. There are barriers to climate action, and I mentioned only two. I mentioned one is the planning, second is the lending by commercial banks that is not accessible to poor people or low income people for the climate change. Equally true is about investment. We are willing to attract all kinds of non-transparent financing to invest in this country, be it coal, be it infrastructure development, roads or whatever, but we are not raising the bar that we are interested only in clean technologies so that this country could transition towards net zero emissions. So we have not set our ambitions right. We want the world to give us money, but we don't want the world to ask us questions that what you're trying to do to protect your own country, your own civilization, your own economy, your own people and their livelihoods. So I think the rot, as I say, is in the state of Denmark. It's here in this country. Pakistan's London, as it was mentioned in literature, London Bridge is falling down. London Bridge is Pakistan. It's falling down and we are not getting up. With the largest contingent we are sending to COP, at least two chief ministers, at least 20 secretaries from federal and provincial governments, and the federal cabinet, most of it is already sitting in Dubai. I know they are sitting for other reasons also, and they are very important reasons. But instead of working here in the neighborhoods, at the community level, at the district levels, as Imran, my friend, was saying, where is the local government? My last point in this regard, we oftentimes say that we don't have an absorptive capacity. Yes, we don't have an absorptive capacity. If somebody gives us $50 million, we cannot then open a bank account for 2 years. And then every project will be a delayed project. It will never finish. We don't have an absorptive capacity because we don't have the local government. That's where the money should be spent. If we don't open the bank account at that level to spend money where it should be spent, we will not be able to spend millions of billions that may come to us in the name of climate change. So I think Farrukh is absolutely right. It's a wake-up call for us. We need to get our act together, and very quickly. It's a very, very serious threat or challenge for Pakistan. Thank you.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ali Tauqeer Saab, for that insight. And building on that, I want Dr. Imran to also respond to, especially given the fact that whenever we talk about actions that are needed at home, and the way that we need to raise the bar, as Ali Saab was referring to, I want to then understand, given our kind of constraints, both political and economic, and the kind of challenges that we have, especially in terms of lack of governance or a lack of unanimity on a lot of issues, and then actual drive to get things done, and to have better systems and infrastructures in place, how will we be able to make sure that all of this is set right to make sure that we have those steps in the right order also towards climate change that can then be presented to global leaders, and a sort of international way forward can then be looked after. I understand there's so much necessity to look inwards and do a lot more, but I want you to also comment on the capability or willingness as to what is going on here, and the kind of system hindrances also that exist.
Right, thank you. So I'd like to say that the glass is half full, and we need to utilize windows of opportunities. Windows of opportunity do arise, and I'll give you an example. So WWF Pakistan has just been able to successfully get a grant through the Green Climate Fund. We worked on it for 5 years along with the Ministry of Climate Change, Ministry of Water Resources, WWF office in the US. And this is funding to the tune of about 78 million US dollars. We were able to get partnerships with the Coca-Cola Foundation as well as USAID to finalize this deal. And the funding is just, it's been agreed upon, and hopefully we'll be commencing the project. And what this project will do, it will address flood risk issues in those areas that were affected by the 2010 floods and the 2022 floods. So the project was first conceived after the 2010 floods, but it took us about 5 or 6 years to get the funding in. And when last year's floods happened, we already had this project in the pipeline. And the Green Climate Fund, realizing that Pakistan was facing extreme damage through the flood event, decided that this was the right time for project to go ahead. Now, why is it a window of opportunity? It's a window of opportunity because it will highlight our skill set, it will highlight our capacity, it will highlight the good things in our governance system, the ability to meet each other and to resolve conflicts and to address those communities that are most at risk. Now, this needs to happen within the next 5 to 10 years. And as an example, if this project is successful, I'm sure we can bring in other projects in the same manner and address similar climate risks across the country. So yes, there are opportunities. It's just that we have to build on this. Enhance capacity. At this time, we need our academia, our universities to step up and train students in terms of addressing not only environmental risk, but also climate risk. We need on-ground action. We need data sharing. We need to ensure, again, this has been said again and again, but it needs repeating that without an effective local government system, no amount of planning, no amount of financial help, no amount of technical help will be fruitful. Because at the end of the day, it is the communities who need to be in charge of these projects. So I can go on and on, but given where we are at and given that there are opportunities available, we need to, use those windows of opportunity. The example of Indonesia and Vietnam and Senegal vis-a-vis just transition energy funding that has come through to the tune of billions of dollars. We can learn from that. So here we lack in proposals when it comes to that just energy transition. Over the past 10 years, we've invested in coal power plants when the world has been looking and moving towards renewables. China is a leader in renewables. Why couldn't we have, picked on that? And so what really needs to happen is to cater our plans to where the world is going and then put forth those plans when opportunities arise and try and access that. But at the end of the day, this will need to happen locally with or without financial help.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Imran Saqib, and thank you very much, Mr. Ali Tauqeer Sheikh, for being part of the discussion as well and joining us in the debate today. Of course, there's a lot that remains to be seen in terms of how we're going to be able to capitalize on COP28 and move forward, but we really hope that this is a platform that we can actually utilize and bring forward not just climate change justice, but also the kind of factors and measures that need to be taken at home. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for being part of the discussion as well. That's all that we have from the debate, and we'll be updating you with regards to what goes on as part of the Prime Minister's visit and, of course, as part of COP28 as well. That's all we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.